So this is Hodgepodge Mama, and this is part two of my videos on multilingual parenting. In part one, I kind of gave you an overview of why we are raising our daughter to be multilingual and how that looks in our family. And in this video, I wanted to just give you some suggestions for how to incorporate this multilingual parenting into your own family. So the first thing is to have a goal and make it a priority. So to say, oh yeah, I would love for my kid to be bilingual, that's very vague, okay? You have to have a specific goal in mind. So I had mentioned in my other video that our goal is for our daughter to know how to read and write, basic Polish, basic Spanish, and have a conversation with a native speaker in both languages. Some parents I know actually may intend for their child to be able to choose to go to college, higher education in the given target language. That is great. I think that's much more doable if you're working with two languages as opposed to three or more languages, as is our case. Plus, it kind of depends on where you live as well. Maybe if you're, in a more multilingual environment like the European Union, that may be more feasible to go to college or university in another country and have to know that language. But that's not a goal for us. So other parents don't really care necessarily if their child is biliterate. They just want to be able to understand and speak the language. So there's a variety. So make up your mind what your goal is for your child, and then make it a priority. Don't just kind of put it on the back burner. It'd be nice if it happened. No, you actually have to pursue it. You actually have to work towards it. Okay, it's not just something that's going to magically happen because you happen to know the language, or especially if you don't, or both if you don't, if you're co-parenting. The receptive bilingualism is when the child understands, or the person understands the language, but they don't communicate in it. They're not able to express themselves very well in that language, or not at all in that language. This happens a lot with immigrant families where the parents continue to use the native language, and the kids, once they get kind of assimilated into the school system, they may be ashamed of the native language or native culture or whatever, and they'll start to respond to the parents in English. And then if the parents kind of allow that to happen long term, so you're having a bilingual conversation where the parent speaks the native language, the child responds in English, let's say, what you may probably end up with is a receptive bilingual as opposed to a true bilingual. So your child will understand everything just fine, but they really won't be able to hold a conversation. So again, if that's good enough for your goal, that's fine, that's great, but just be aware of that, be cognizant of that, okay? Also, ideally, the parents, unless you're a single parent, you're going to have to come to an agreement on this being a priority and what specific goal you have. Even just having one parent on board is better than no parent at all, okay? You may not be able to reach your goal, but if there's too much resistance from the other parent, but don't just abandon ship before you even start, okay? One possible challenge that I am aware of is when you have one bilingual parent and one monolingual parent, and the monolingual parent is kind of resistant to the idea of their child speaking a language they don't understand, especially like in front of them. I suppose they might feel left out, or I don't know, maybe that the child and other parent, bilingual parent, are talking about them or something. I don't know. It's a very common concern for monolinguals in general, not specifically in a multilingual household. I don't know what to tell you, monolinguals. You can always learn the language, okay? There's some cases where I think it's rude to continue to use a language that not everybody is aware of. This is not one of those cases. You're trying to teach your child the language, not just using it. You're trying to give your child an opportunity that they cannot get in any other way. Waiting until they start taking foreign language in school is not going to give them the same level of competence, okay, as if you are able to use the language at home. So be aware of that. The first thing I would say, specifically to the monolingual parent who might be resistant, is you have to put your child's needs ahead of your own insecurities, because that's what we're dealing with. You're feeling insecure. Get over it, okay? If your child showed musical abilities or athletic abilities and that wasn't you, would you seriously stand in the way of them pursuing that because you feel left out because you don't share that? You're not able to do that with them? No, right? So you got to put your child's best interest ahead of your own insecurity. That's the first thing. Second of all, learn along with your child, right? Your child is starting with 0, so are you. There's no reason for you to not take this on as kind of a fun family challenge, okay? Read children's books in the target language. This is so easy. This is so easy because children's books are written for children. They're very easy, very basic vocabulary, okay? You're going to pick it up in no time if you spend any kind of quality time with your kids, right? So definitely do that. Start by just kind of being there when the bilingual parent is reading to them. You'll figure it out and start reading along, assuming that you're using a similar alphabet to the language that you know, of course. Third, just be around in general and listen to your child communicating with their bilingual parent, because you're going to start to pick up from context clues, right? You're going to see what's going on and kind of assume, where are they looking at? What's happening between them? Oh, I keep hearing that same word over and over again. That's probably what that means. And if you don't know, you can ask, right? It's your spouse, for crying out loud. So it's very easy for you to just start picking up the language right along with your child. Okay, so those are the 3 kind of suggestions I have for that. The second thing, once you've set your specific goal and made it a priority, you want to provide resources in the target language on a regular, aka daily basis. So many and various children's books in the target language is not enough to have 1 or 2. Okay, because the reason for reading to your child is to expand their vocabulary. Books provide exposure to topics that may not come up in day-to-day conversation at home between parents and children. That's the whole point of reading to your kids, right? Is to build the vocabulary in any language, okay? And so you would be reading in both English, let's say, and whatever your second language is that you're trying to teach your child. Also, music and video in the target language. I had mentioned previously that we allowed our daughter to watch a couple of her favorite shows, but only in Polish and Spanish. So we know that at least she's getting that vocabulary, that language reinforcement when she's got media. I've heard this, other parents do this as well, even with older kids, right? If you're done with your homework and you want to watch some TV, that's great. But it's going to be in the target language. All of your media is only in your target language. Okay, so that is a rule that you can make in your home to reinforce the language. Toys with printed words in the target language, flashcards, like with colors, shapes, whatever, posters with the alphabet in the first or target language rather, or body parts illustrated, various different things, whatever stuff you can get your hands on that you want to be teaching your child, just exposure to the language, so it's not just something that's between the bilingual parent and the child, but that they start to see that, okay, this language has a place in the bigger world, right? A challenge in this area is availability of items. Depending on where you live and what language we're talking about, you may not be able to come across. You may not necessarily be able to just go to Walmart or Target and pick up a few things, or the bookstore or something. You may have to go online, and that's always a great place to find stuff and have it shipped. If you have family overseas or in a home country, you can ask them to try to find you resources. So yes, it may cost a bit, but this is going back to the fact that you made a goal and you're setting this as a priority. Okay, so because it's a priority, you realize it may cost you a little bit of money, so you'll have to pull that from something else that's gonna not be as important as providing these resources for your child. Third, you want to create opportunities for your child to be exposed to the target language outside of the home. I had alluded to this a minute ago. You want them to associate the language with society in general, not just the parent that's bilingual. Because as they get older, they're, especially if they're going to be in a school setting where peer pressure is going to affect them, whether you want to admit it or not, one of the ways peer pressure is going to affect them is they're going to think, well, what's the point of this language? It's just something my mom does or something my dad does. There's no real reason for me to know it or use it. You want them to realize that there's like entire countries out there where this is the language that they use. You want them to be aware of books and music that they can only appreciate if they know the language, right? There's always something lost in translation or listening to a song when you don't actually know the words. So there's a whole other world to be experienced if you know that other language, and you want to reinforce it. You want to teach your child that. You can't just assume that they're going to figure that out on their own. So how do you do that? First of all, if you can find play dates with children the same age as your child, who also know the target language, that's ideal, because then they're going to be able to form friendships and where they can use that language outside of just what they use with their mom and dad. Church services, worship services in the target language are also a good idea, because they will allow your child to see that something important is being handled in the target language. They'll see both children and adults using this language. Skype or FaceTime with relatives that maybe you can't visit is also valuable, but you of course have to involve your child. So have them be able to talk with grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, whatever, cousins somewhere else. Have grandparents or other relatives maybe read a book in the target language and record it on audio maybe, or just read it over Skype. There's different, be creative. There's different ways to you want to not be the only person that your child hears using the language, okay? Also, try to find professionals like doctors, teachers, nannies, who speak the language, so that you can interact with them in front of your child, and so that they can interact with your child in the target language again, okay? Trips to your ancestral home, whether you were born there or not, or to another country where this target language is spoken, are wonderful, because that's an immersion experience. Everything that they could possibly want to experience is going to be done in the target language. So they'll be able to, everything, is up for grabs. Whatever they have fun with is going to be done through the target language. So if you can afford that, if you can swing that, definitely trips and travel. Finally, a challenge may be that you may need to travel or commute, depending on where you live, depending on the availability of your target language in your community. And again, you got to go back to your step one. What's your goal, and how have you prioritized this, right? Is this really a priority? Because if it is a priority for your child to grow up multilingual, then you're going to make whatever sacrifice is necessary to commute on a regular basis to, let's say, a language school, or to a different church where you can be exposed to the target language, or to travel back to the home country. It's up to you what your family needs are, right? But again, that's why I said start with a goal that you and your partner can agree on and set it as a priority. Look for resources to support your efforts. Don't base it strictly on your speaking to your child. And then expose them to other people using the language, both live and through media. So I hope that has been helpful, and I want to say thank you to my two friends, Yessenia and Tyler, for requesting kind of this part of the video. I hope it has been helpful, and until next time, do widzenia, adios.